My name is Madonna Dunbar. I work for Incline Village General Improvement District as a resource conservationist, and I have a dual title as the Executive Director of the Tahoe Water Suppliers Association. We are a group of water providers here at Lake Tahoe. We use Lake Tahoe with intakes into the lake for domestic drinking water. The association formed in 2002 to work towards protecting a special drinking water status called filtration exemption. There are 6 of the members in the Tahoe Water Suppliers Association who have to disinfect their water through ultraviolet and ozone methods, but we actually, because we have such wonderful clean source water to start with, they don't actually have to filter. There are only 60 systems in the entire United States that do not have to filter out of more than 100,000 water systems. So we formed as a group to work on documenting what's happening in the watershed. It's one of the EPA requirements for that filtration exempt status. Most filtration exempt water providers own their watershed and have a big old fence around it. If you've ever been in the Adirondacks, New York City's water system has a 12-foot chain link fence with barbed wire around a lot of the reservoirs. Here at Tahoe, we're in a different place. We've got a great body of water out there, but there is definitely development. So there's some reporting protocols, and that was the initial formation of the association. Since that time, we've been working in the community to let people know where the drinking water comes from and how to appreciate that. I encourage you to take a water bottle at the end of the night to take with you. We run the Drink Tahoe Tap campaign. And so part of that work, as I said, we're documenting what's happening in the watershed. So in 2008, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers commissioned a study for the Tahoe Water Suppliers Association to do a risk assessment model. What's happening with contaminants coming from the shore? What's happening with airborne contamination? And that work was done by a contractor, Black & Beach, and they did an initial risk assessment, and they did some time of travel modeling and maps, so that if something happened near Sand Harbor, how long would it take if it did enter one of the creeks to get into the lake and travel around. A lot of the work was kind of rudimentary. It was a very useful tool, but it definitely had some of its limits. Last year, the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection realized that there was some development occurring here in the southeast corner of the lake, primarily the Edgewood Lodge development and the Tahoe Beach Club. And with those 2 projects, there's a small area of beach that's opening up to public access. The big concern for drinking water providers is, of course, pathogens, viruses and bacteria. That risk assessment model was primarily an analysis of virus and bacteria from swimmers, from recreational contact. So last year, NDEP said, we want to make sure if we're going to let these developments really go forward, what are the impacts going to be if we open up these small beach areas to a couple hundred more people a day, because there are several intakes right in that southeast corner of the lake. There's Edgewood, there's Round Hill, there's Kingsbury GID, and there's Lakeside just on the other side of the state line. So they commissioned a much more refined study, because since between 2008 and 2012 and 13, Dr. Schladow's team has developed a way to get much more refined in the model, in the grid analysis of what's happening with water currents in the lake. And that's what he's going to be talking about tonight. So NDEP and TWSA teamed up together to commission Dr. Schladow and his team to do more of this risk analysis. And we've gotten some really interesting information out of it. One of the good things that's happened between 2008 and 2012 is there's some new EPA drinking water requirements called long-term surface water treatment 2. And that has required that these filtration exempt systems have not just a primary treatment such as ozone or UV and chlorine in the lines to keep it clean, but they've had to go to redundancy. So we now have double levels of protection on disinfection for raw water that is actually really, really, really low levels of any type of pathogens in it. So with that said, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to introduce Dr. Schladow. If you do not know Dr. Schladow, he's the director of the Tahoe Environmental Research Center. He's one of the most well-known limnologists here in the country.
In this room.
And in this room. Continuing on with the great work of Dr. Charles Goldman. I think you're going to really enjoy his presentation because he takes some really big conceptual and theoretical analysis and is able to present it in a very entertaining and understandable manner.
Jeff, the model you used for the particles on that transport model, yes, was that a particular time of year, or was that summertime movement model, or where you showed the green
tennis balls?
No, the green where you released from the Tahoe Key is the
Oh, again, that was summer. Yeah. Like I said, it was not meant to simulate any practice.
Yeah.
I would love to simulate different months of the year and to stimulate decay and dilution and all those sorts of things.
I do think it's important that when we use surrogates in the keys with the rotary WT dye, as you point out, and I appreciate your caveats on that because it's true.
Yeah,
anything that's organic and changing is going to break down and does break down. But what the key about this is that it tells you where to monitor and tells you where the potential is.
Yeah, and that's something. So measurement, and I mentioned before, we need the measurements to understand, to validate the models, but the models, I think, help us refine our measurements. I mean, you spend a lot of money measuring in the wrong place. And at least this helps you try to get in the right ballpark. I should introduce Mars Anderson. Mars is he's like the king of aquatic species.
Is there any word to see what changes might occur due to the changing climate?
Yeah. I mean, we have done studies on changing climate using a very different model, using sort of one-dimensional model that doesn't look at circulation, it looks at how deeply the lake mixes vertically. We've proposed to different groups at different times, and groups outside this basin, NSF and the like, to use this model to do that. Now, it's prohibitive to run this model for 100 years straight, but what we do have are future projections of likely climates in the future. So it'll actually take, every 20 years, take the likely climate, and see how does the circulation change. I mean, with different wind patterns, different wind intensities, the shifts in high and low pressures, you get changes in wind direction. And that, to me, that's fascinating. So yeah, we're looking to do that.
So Jeff, you showed the mixing of or the movement of the lake based on wind and other factors. Is there some interaction between sort of the circular motions, for instance, if something is going up the east shore, is there sort of a handoff of the baton between this area and the next area?
At times. So very often, well, now I'm sort of, let me get a map of the lake up there. Okay. Very often out there in the middle of the lake, we have these gyres. What they're often driven by is this jet of water that comes across, literally hits Dead Man's Point and splits either way, and then the wind just keeps pumping it. What happens right at the near shore, I don't know yet. That's where it would be nice to sort of start looking at that. So some of you may have heard that we're starting to find
Asian clams at Sand Harbor.
Steve Teixeira said it, not me.
That's right, I said it so you didn't have to.
Thank you. Whether they got, so we've had, right now we know that they're literally along here and in Emerald Bay. We haven't looked or had any reports in Glenbrook, but we found them at Sand Harbor. So whether they just want to be, their larvae are being carried along, could be plausible. Whether it was just a boat that was down here in the south and had a bit of water in its bilge and happened to have some larvae in it, and then came to Sand Harbor and backed off and the bilge pump kicked on, I don't know. And it probably doesn't matter, because They're here now, and then whatever currents are there, they're going to carry them along.
Well, I guess it matters only from the standpoint of, is it a boat carry, or is it something in the interaction of the waves and such? Because if it's a boat thing, that's one thing, but if it's an interaction of the currents, that could be something more insidious.
But I would think both have the potential to.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, Brad Allen, our boat captain, he's convinced that the way they got to Emerald Bay
Right.
was through the bilge hypothesis.
Okay.
And he drives boats,
Yeah.
so that's, he's biased. I, of course, think, oh, currents doesn't carry them there. And who knows, it probably happened both ways.
Well, we've seen the movement of the invasive curlew pondweed go from the Keys area up that shore to the eastern side, following the currents, it looks like. Yeah, up that direction, quite much, and almost only one instance of it in Emerald Bay, which is interesting because you showed one of those drogues heading that direction, but it never made it, I guess.
No, I didn't. It's sort of, that would have been the prize for me. We just gone straight through this area. So about that. But it's, yeah, and I did that crossing in 12 hours. And so these, for the Asian clam, not the leaf material, they literally have, I think it's 48 hours to find habitat. So if they're in the middle of the lake and the 48 hours is up, they're going to settle and they're going to live a long, happy 2-year life at the bottom of the lake and not reproduce. So they're out of business. If they make it across here, then they can potentially reproduce, start a new colony. And that's what I think happened in Emerald Bay.
Why don't you put the instrumentation at the intakes? If the idea is water quality, that's it, rather than all this modeling and where's it going, just, it's a fixed point and you can...
Well, they do that. They don't have it at the intake, but, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, I think all the water suppliers,
Facility.
they monitor what they're pumping in, so they know what the turbidity is, they know what the temperature is, the pH.
Can you plug that into your models?
We haven't used that data, but we've sort of, sorry, we haven't used it directly, but we've checked with it at different times to see whether it's
Corroborated?
Yeah, but what was but sort of getting back, I guess, to your first question, let's say a water supplier suddenly finds dissolved organic material is high. Well, they have two options. One is they can stop pumping until it goes away, or if they have some of their treatment processes can cope with that, that's good. If they can't, then I'm not sure what they do. What I'm saying, if we knew what was happening there, we may be able to find the source of that. Why is it that, it's here, Camp Rich, water quality has actually gone down or has gone up? I don't know. But that's what I think is important, so that agencies, suppliers can know ahead of time what's happening. And nobody likes surprises, especially when it's something you can't treat for. So I spoke on your behalf, correct me if I'm wrong.
So Jeff, on the fine scale in your shore network, there's some 60 inputs into the lake when we have rain, right? No.
Oh, that's just the streams.
Yeah, so are you, is that the goal too? Because those are clearly going to be different from shorelines that don't have.
Yeah, so what we know the locations of all the streams. I think currently 6 of them are gauged, so we know what the flows are, and those data will be online with all this, so you can actually look to see, let's say here at Incline, you can look to, when we have a station there, you can look at changes in water quality with flows in Incline Creek. Incline Creek is the monitored one. We know the locations of the culverts. So again, they're not monitored, but at least we can see where they are in proximity. So if something goes up here and there's no drain and there's no stream, then that's interesting. Probably means there's something wrong with the instrument, maybe. But I hope not, especially if you suddenly see it in 2 instruments, which is why having more than 6 is important.
If there were to be a release of the keys of pollutant used to control invasive species, what would you want to be monitoring? It sounds like wind speed to be able to run your model and predict the transport of that. What kinds of things would you want to run your model?
We have the wind speed. I mean, we already have that that's coming. Essentially, as Lars suggested, you probably do some preliminary model runs for that time of year, get some sense of where things are likely to go. I think you actually want to have some physical water samples. From the point of view of the model, I think we have all we need. We have the wind, we know the initial condition, we have enough, we know what the stratification is in the lake. We're collecting that already. So it's just running the model. And then the ultimate thing is to measure what it is you're trying to see. And if the model predicts that 300 meters from the mouth of Tahoe Keys, you're at non-detect levels, then yeah, measure it at 100, 200, 300, and 400, and see if that's what you get.
Do all of those funded nearshore sites have sewer lines within close proximity to the shore?
I have no idea.
You mean,
No idea.
you mean stormwater outfalls or sewer lines?
Sewer lines.
You mean,
We've got maps of that. We can,
I was just curious if that was a conscious decision to... No, okay.
No. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about if there was a ruptured sewer line, would these be, yeah, I have no idea.
Are these zones going to be tied in with the citizen science exhibit that's coming in the future?
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning that. So this is something, I just got a grant to do this. This is neat. So here we are. Here down the road, we have all these wonderful instruments in there, and they're giving us indications of water quality, and they're all saying it's perfect. No algae, no turbidity, temperatures just right. Who wouldn't want to be here? In summer especially, you have a whole army of people out there experiencing the beaches. And even though our instrument tells them it's perfect, they may be having a very different experience. There may be algae washed up on the beach and it smells. It may be really slippery. So the idea here is a very simple app. On your phone, you answer 4 questions. Actually, we're going to have a little stakeholder meeting just to, from the community to get a sense of what those questions should be, what's of interest. The idea is you take 2 minutes, answer those questions, maybe take a photo, send the data in. If only 1 or 2 people do it, then okay, you don't get a whole lot. But the idea that we actually find that people sort of swimming down here are experiencing bad conditions. We don't have a sensor there. There's something they don't like there. There's something bad that we either can't measure or we don't have an instrument there. That's real information. So we're, as I said, we have funding to do that. We got this grant from the Institute for Museum and Library Studies, which is great. And we're sort of going to set it up for Tahoe, but the idea, well, one of the ideas is that people who do this will soon start to self-organize. And maybe the people from Round Hill will start sending in great photos to make the people at Tahoe City feel bad. And they will start doing that. And then somebody at Donna Lake will say, well, we can do this. Donna Lake's better than Tahoe. And they'll start doing it. And we get the data, but people are not competing, but they're actually paying attention to their environment. And they can see that data, and they can get to this data just as well. Come on, bring it back.
How come the southwest or southeast quadrant there is missing a monitoring station? You got Camp Bridge on one side and all the way Sand Harbor.
private
Try to get another one.
It's funded. No power? These aren't funded.
The blue are funded.
No
Yeah, there's
power.
nobody there. I mean,
There's no
just-
power, there's
basically
nobody.
no power, there's just sheer cliffs there. So that's, I could put
There's
something
no
there.
nearshore. And that's
No way
similar,
of doing
that's
it.
similar between Glenbrook and Thunderbird.
Yeah, the same there, no access, no power. I mean, we could run this off solar panels, but it may be hard to get those past sort of the scenic parts. So that's fine. Hey, I would gladly live without those two areas.
Wave powered.
So how much are those stations?
Very economical. Okay, so what, they're actually, these are very high resolution instruments. I mean, like we said, turbidity at Tahoe is extremely low, 0.2. And this can measure 0.002. Very low, so detection limits are low. Research grade is one instrument, there's another one on the back that's an optical instrument. So the cost to purchase the instruments, install them, maintain them, calibrate them, we have to move them every 2 months because as the water level changes, they're no longer at the right depth, so we have to do all that. And then we have to make provision at the end to remove it all. So that's what we ask people for, either individuals or in some cases, yes, thank you. HOAs, groups of neighbors, families, is a commitment for 4 years, $12,500 a year. Okay. Otherwise,
Silent option.
Jeff, you mentioned earlier that those probes, that,
You can
I'm not raising my hand, by the way. But you mentioned that those probes included algae measurements.
Yeah.
Is that chlorophyll A? Is that what?
Yeah, that's, so it has 3 little optical sensors. Basically, these very sort of highly tuned LED. This is probably just a fire, nothing more. And so one measures chlorophyll A, which is a pigment in algae. Another measures this dissolved material when algae break down. And the third one literally sends out light and it gets scattered back by particles, which measures turbidity. And it's very cute. I don't have a photo. It's got 3 little windows on the front, and it's got this little wiper in the middle. So every 5 minutes, it cleans itself. Because otherwise you get material building up there.
Yeah, because we've had problems
Yeah.
with those probes in the past, like,
Yeah.
or, you know, a piece of algae or a leaf just
Yeah.
lands on there. and, yes, they should be removed.
So how do you measure the streaming algae? How do you measure the attached?
Well, that,
No, this will measure the one, no, this will measure the ones, that are free floating in the water. The ones that are attached, that's a whole lot more difficult. We actually have a proposal in now we're partnering actually with the company that sort of has the black instrument at the back. They have a new instrument that we can literally put 2 inches from a rock that's covered with slime, and it measures not just the amount of chlorophyll in there, sort of the algae, but the rate at which photosynthesis is happening. So we actually can start getting all this additional information of how quickly photosynthesis is taking place, and is it being inhibited by a lack of nitrogen or a lack of phosphorus. So this is actually very exciting. These instruments haven't existed for so long. We're not buying it, not asking anybody to buy it because we don't know it'll work. But if it does, it'll teach us a lot about the attached algae.
Did you say they're only 2 meters deep?
Well, we put them 2 meters
Yes,
depth.
it seems like to me a boat, a high-powered boat might cause some turbulence and affect those readings.
Yeah, they would. And that's actually an interesting question. What effect do boats have?
Yeah.
I mean, we're taking a bit of a risk. There are some boats that may draw, well, yeah, this doesn't stand up that high off the water. So I'm hoping that somebody who has a boat that draws 2 meters of water won't be right here.
No, I mean, it's
Yeah.
turbulence.
Yeah, but the turbulence from it's a good question.
I would put them down 4 meters.
Well, but that's very different than, well, I don't know, maybe we should do that as an experiment at some point. But we wanted to get that near shore. One reason we did it is that there's been, our colleagues at DRI, for a number of years went out and did circumnavigations of the lake and measured water quality 3-4 times a year. And they chose 2 meters. And so in the interest of making this data intercomparable with that data, that was another reason. But yeah, I mean, there's no scientific reason it has to be a 2 or 3 or 4, other than it'll be different. And I think there is this debate about what effect do boats have. We've sort of just finished some work that indicates they don't have a significant effect.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, they'll cause it to come up, but it'll go down just as quickly.
Jeff, and some of the, I can't remember now whether it was the drogues or whether it was the particles, they moved off from the keys towards the west in that direction. Is that, do you think, primarily from the cooler temperatures at night and that water sinking and moving it, or is it just wind?
Yeah, we just didn't look
Yeah.
that close. I mean, there's so much we haven't looked at, a lot of the details. It would be really interesting. I mean, we did some work on the graduate student, did some work on the keys maybe 4 or 5 years ago, looking at the channel that goes between the lake and the Tahoe Keys, and actually and also the marina there. And what she found is that there's constantly flow between the lake and the Keys. Now, there have been other studies to show that flow doesn't extend all the way back into all the different parts of the Keys. So it's very complex within there. But within the channel itself, there is motion. And a lot of this motion is not driven by wind, it's driven by temperature differences.
You saw a lot of temperature vertical mixing within the keys, even back into the coves back there, where at nighttime that cold water sinks.
Yeah.
Very, very, a little bit of summer.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that in winter, it gets really cold in the Tahoe Keys. So the temperatures go below 4 degrees Celsius, so the colder water actually becomes lighter. And so it turns out that the lighter water is always flowing out at the top, summer or winter. Take this outside. Maybe ask the tough
I do have a question. So your gyros at the top are moving it around counterclockwise. That means it's heading for the Truckee River. The gyros, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, the Truckee River, that's being fed from that area off the Tahoe City shelf.
Yeah.
We don't know what's happening there. Put drogues out there, they go really slowly. Things are different there. It's very shallow water.
Going through that.
Is there any resonant sloshing of water around once the wind starts moving? Like down in San Francisco, the bay starts, a lot of its tides are actually resonant.
Yeah, so it's a question about resonance. If you push something at just the right time, it gets bigger and bigger. Ever tried to push a swing at the wrong time, it hurts your wrist. If you do it at the right time, kids start screaming. And so, yeah, that does happen here. So there are certain amplitudes, certain periods that do get amplified at times. What we actually, I actually gave you the simple version. I didn't realize this was such a well-educated audience, as it is. So when I showed you that box sloshing backwards and forwards, I left out one very important thing, and that is that the Earth rotates. And Lake Tahoe is large enough, unlike a toilet, which doesn't rotate one way in the northern hemisphere and another way in the southern. Lake Tahoe is large enough that the Earth's rotation changes the motions. So instead of just rocking backwards and forwards, it actually rotates as it rocks. And there's a wave that goes around the lake every 5 days on account of this. So as well as the rocking, you've got the turning around, you've got these 5-day waves. It's really, when you look at the data, there's lots of frequencies in there. So there's a 19-hour period, 5 days, there's 120 hours, there's so the second mode at 2.5 days, it's great.
Which way is it going, clockwise or counterclockwise?
It's going counterclockwise. So there's something called the inertial period. So glad you asked. So the inertial period depends where you are on the Earth. And so for Tahoe and our latitude, the inertial period here is 19 hours. So any oscillations with a period less than 19 hours will go clockwise. Players with a period greater than 19 hours will go counterclockwise. It's great.
How big is this wave?
Oh, it's huge.
You haven't noticed it before?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's not sort of breaking up the surface and sort of swamping boats or anything like that. The surface is still flat, but it's doing its thing. No, we have them measured at like 300 meters. I mean, when the temperature stratification is very weak, let's say in the spring or late winter, the weaker the stratification, the bigger the amplitude. They're huge. Okay, Madonna, I think we've worn these guys out.
Yeah.